The Supreme Court's landmark 6-3 decision to give a president some immunity against prosecution for official acts in office is reverberating across the country. So for more on how former President Donald Trump and his campaign are reacting, let's go to CBS News campaign reporter Jake Rosen in Washington. Jake, start us off.
Hey, so we've seen Donald Trump already tout this ruling. He's calling it a win for our Constitution and our democracy. And the campaign just put out a fundraising blast right before I came down here to talk to you, Lindsay, touting the decision today and trying to fundraise off of this. We've seen the campaign continually do this with all the Supreme Court rulings, whether it was on the Colorado ballot initiative or just things like the conviction and indictments that the former president has faced. But the Trump campaign taking a victory lap yet again today.
What are we hearing from his allies?
Well, for potential vice presidential selection, J.D. Vance said it's a massive win for Trump and the rule of law, basically saying that it might have destroyed Jack Smith's case. We've seen Donald Trump Jr., Trump's son, obviously saying it was a solid Supreme Court ruling, but that he believes the lawfare, as he put it, against Donald Trump will continue as the next couple of weeks and months move forward into the convention, and prosecutors presumably would try to move these cases forward in the limited scope that they're now allowed to going into the fall.
How has Trump been discussing this case on the campaign trail?
Well, he's repeatedly pointed to it in not just, Truth Social posts like we saw today. The former president has not come out and spoken on video or on camera yet reacting to this, but he has talked about immunity in terms of what he would do as president. And when he brings it up on the trail, he talks about in order to keep you safe, you as in his supporters and the country safe, a president needs immunity so that they're not worried about the fear of retribution. Obviously, when it comes to things like President Biden and the alleged crimes that the Trump campaign and the Trump ally, kind of system point to, in terms of President Biden's behavior, that does not apply. But when it comes to how Trump kind of projects this immunity argument going forward, he says he needs it in order to do his job and keep Americans safe if he wins the White House again in November.
But, interestingly, he also was on the John Frederick show and he talked about the immunity case, and he sort of seemed to imply that it would have a bigger impact on President Biden. What did he mean by that?
Well, hopefully we can ask the former president that soon. I think the big thing to remember is that when it comes to, Trump allies suggesting that President Biden should be either indicted for his administration's handling of the U.S. southern border, as some Trump allies have done. I think that's probably what the former president is referring to, although some Trump allies in the recent days have pointed to Attorney General Merrick Garland as the person that would need to be indicted instead of President Biden now that this decision has come down.
Jake Rosen, thank you. For more legal analysis, let's bring back Scott Frederickson. He's a defense attorney and former federal prosecutor. Scott, we've had about 90 minutes now to sort of let this sink in. What are your biggest top lines that you want people at home to know?
Well, historical constitutional decision that empowers the president with absolute immunity for official acts. The court does say no immunity for unofficial acts, but we need to keep in mind this was not just splitting the difference down the middle. The court outlines a very, very strong immunity policy for the president. There's presumptive immunity for the president for any acts taken in the outermost limits of his official acts. And it's presumptive. It's up to the government to prove that that's not the case. In other words, they have the burden of proof. So while it's not a total absolute immunity, it's a decision that really reflects a fairly overwhelming amount of power for the president to be protected by this. Now, I think what has been lost so far and what the dissent is getting at, and why the dissent here, written by Justice Sotomayor, is so upset about, essentially they're saying, look, you can use official acts, which you, the majority, is saying absolute immunity for official acts of the president. They're saying, let's be realistic. You can use, a president can engage in official acts to subvert the Constitution. So that, say, at the end of the 2020 election, instead of what President Trump did, let's say he instead said, in my official duties, my core constitutional duties to protect the this country and you citizens. I've been told by my advisors that a foreign power is involved in elections, so I'm going to shut it down. And this decision says the prosecutors, the government can't use evidence of the president's advisors or his private records. So let's say the president said, excuse me, I'm using my core constitutional powers to shut down this election and to stop that certification in Congress because it's being engineered by a foreign power trying to take over our country. And what the dissent is saying, under the majority decision, that's entitled to absolute immunity because he's exercising a core constitutional power to protect this country. And I think that's what the dissent is so upset about. They're essentially saying, as Sotomayor said, immunity, he's immune for anything he does right now. And that's why they're so upset and so worried about this decision.
And a lot of legal scholars and journalists were expecting some kind of middle-of-the-road decision today, similar to the one that we got. I mean, during oral arguments in April, we heard the justices sort of bringing up the fact that the presidency is a job like any other. Presidents have to make incredibly tough decisions for the country and should enjoy some level of protection. Was that addressed in the decision today, in the majority decision?
Well, I think that's an excellent point. You're pointing us towards. I think that was a lot of the motivation behind the decision by Chief Justice Roberts and the 6-3 majority opinion. He's basically saying, look, a president has to be able to conduct the powers of his presidency, the policies. He's got to be able to do the work he needs to do without worrying about being prosecuted for actions that the other party may think are criminal. And so that's why they're laying out this rather broad rule of immunity for official acts here. And so I think that's a lot of is what's behind Justice Roberts' decision. Look, that's a legitimate decision. We've expected some form of official immunity for official acts. What this majority has done is drawn that rather robustly. They're saying, look, it extends to the outermost perimeter of any official acts of the president, and it's presumptively immune. And so we're going to see that in action when Judge Chutkan convenes court within, I think, next week or so to hold hearings on the present charges, because we'll see Judge Chutkan acknowledge that, there's presumptive immunity, and it's up to the government, Jack Smith, to come in and show and carry the burden of proof that the remaining allegations in the indictment that he goes with are all purely private. I say remaining allegations in the indictment because I think what he will do is he's going to take a big scissors to the indictment, and he's going to cut out any counts that relate or could be even close to relating to official acts. The Supreme Court even laid out a couple of examples. For instance, the president talking to Vice President Trump about certification. They said that's part of his official duties. The president threatening to replace the attorney general if they didn't conduct more investigations, et cetera. They said, look, that's within his parameter of his official duties. So that's out of the indictment. And Jack Smith will go through with a fine-tooth comb to try and reduce the indictment to critical, essential parts that can be, I think, said reasonably to only involve personal, private conduct.
Okay. Scott, thank you so much for your expertise on this case and many others that we've discussed with you.